Good afternoon. My name is Tim Schultz, and I'm going to be presenting to you my dissertation topic, which is Does FAFSA verification affect a student's decision to attend college? FAFSA verification is a process that the U.S. Department of Education requires to verify specific data that's listed on the FAFSA, particularly student and parent incomes and household members. The reason for verification is to help as a fraud deterrence and also to correct errors that students and parents have made on the FAFSA. The Department of Education actually selects about 20% of students each year, and the university, at least at Olivet, we select another 5 to 10% each year based on information that we see is incorrect on the FAFSA or that is conflicting with other information that we have about the students. So one of the questions we have is verification unbiased? And unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be because the majority of students who are selected are Pell eligible, which means that they have a lower EFC, generally under about 5,400. The EFC is the expected family contribution, which is a number determined from all the information on the FAFSA and used to help students know what amount of financial aid they're eligible for. And when they're selected for verification, these students are also more often required to provide additional documentation. And that can depend on how they completed the FAFSA. Oftentimes it requires additional documents related to income. And since it's an area that I work with at Olivet, I oftentimes have to request additional documents once they send in the initial documentation. I find other conflicting information that has to be resolved as well, which makes it a complicated process for students and oftentimes a barrier for enrollment. So is verification cost effective? Of course, as I mentioned, it's used as a deterrent for fraud. Government hopes that by this that most people will be honest when they're filling out the FAFSA, put accurate information on it. So what we've found to date so far is that about 2% of students who we verify do show a significant change in their EFC. And generally that change does increase the EFC, which means they receive less of the Pell Grant or other potential aid. The process is also very time consuming, and in the end, I think it's really a poor use of taxpayer and university funds. So before I get into my hypotheses that I would potentially like to pursue in the dissertation, I do want to talk briefly about what verification melt is, since that's what my topic will be dealing with. So what happens in verification melt is basically a student files a FAFSA to the Department of Education and they select them for verification, or sometimes, as I've mentioned, Olivet will also select a student. The student doesn't complete the verification, and that's where the melt comes in. We lose them because they've not completed that process, which means that they're no longer eligible for the assistance, and oftentimes the student doesn't enroll in college. So my first hypothesis is that low-income students are disproportionately affected by FAFSA verification because students with a low EFC are selected at a higher rate. Low-income students experience a higher rate of verification melt than high-income students. So the low-income students, as I've mentioned, they do face additional barriers, oftentimes requiring that additional information to complete the verification. We do find that a lot of the low-income students are also first generation, and so they don't have the social capital, the parents, the family who have attended college before, who are able to help them through the process. So I'm suspecting that the low-income students do experience a higher rate of verification melt. My second hypothesis is that there's interventions such as high school counselors, college counselor meetings. The more that a student meets with a counselor, the better that chance that they'll be attending college. Also, technology can play a role. by texting, emailing, social media contacts, letting students know, encouraging them in positive ways to complete their FAFSA will definitely help more students, I think, to complete the FAFSA and avoid that verification melt. And along with that, parent education is extremely important, particularly for the first generation students. And my third hypothesis is that students who are already on the fringe of attending college are use verification as an excuse not to enroll. So they may not have been really excited to begin with to attend college, and they're looking for that reason not to enroll. And they hit this barrier that they just think is insurmountable, and so that's their reason, so they just don't enroll. Others want to just work. Maybe they found a trade that they're interested in and become a journeyman, something like that. And as I've already mentioned, the verification oftentimes can be difficult, and so they just assume that it's too difficult to overcome. So with my hypotheses, once I test those, potential outcomes I would like to have is for my research to add to the research that the Department of Education uses to help guide its policies, hopefully eliminate or greatly reduce the verification burden. I don't think we'll eliminate it. Government, of course, needs checks and balances, but hopefully some other methods can be used to help deter the fraud and help students correct their FAFSA and perhaps file it correctly the first time. I'd also like to see it possibly help universities like Olivet learn more about why students don't complete verification and determine better ways to help them through that process. And finally, that it would be that we could develop a model that would help other schools to assist students through that process as well. So I'm looking forward to getting started on this, and I look forward to hearing each of your stories as well. Thank you.